Saris yanked Jackson into a shadowed alcove just as energy bolts hissed past, searing the air and leaving charred craters in the corridor's scarred metal walls. Though usually she said her voice steady despite the chaos, my visits here come with more ceremony and less sprinting for my life. Jackson risked a glance around the corner. The two peacekeepers advanced with textbook precision, covering each other's angles in a disciplined, dance-patient, professional, and utterly relentless. The worst kind of hunters. "Got any bright ideas?" he asked, his voice low, pulse hammering. Saris's smile was a blade's edge sharp enough to slice through durasteel. Just one. From her jacket, she produced not the plasma blade Lyra had flagged, but a sleek silver cylinder, etched with intricate Aurelian runes. Before Jackson could question it, she pressed it against the wall and uttered a single word in High Aurelian, her voice resonant with ancient authority. Every light, every system, every scrap of tech within 100 meters flickered and died. The darkness was absolute, a suffocating weight pressing against Jackson's eyes. "EMP," he whispered, voice barely cutting through the void. "Something like that." Saris replied, her hand finding his in the dark, warm and steady, grounding him. "Aurelian crown blood come with certain privileges, including toys that make your human tech quiver." They moved through the blackness, guided by touch and instinct, Saris leading with the unshakable confidence of someone trained for exactly this moment. Behind them, the peacekeepers' curses echoed their gear, as lifeless as the station around them. When emergency power finally sputtered to life, bathing the corridors in a hellish red glow. They were 2 levels up, moving fast toward the docking bays. The massive bay doors loomed ahead, and beyond them, Jackson glimpsed the Star Falcon 9, waiting like a loyal beast. She wasn't much to look at, a patched-together relic of military scouting days. Her hull a mosaic of scars and hasty repairs, each telling a story of near misses and stubborn survival. But her engines purred with reliability, her shields were battle-tested, and Lyra kept her humming with an AI's obsessive precision. "That's your ship?" Saris asked, her tone caught between amusement and skepticism. "Don't judge a book by its cover," Jackson said, a defensive edge in his voice. "She's got heart where it counts. I sincerely hope so." They reached the docking tube, and Jackson's fingers flew over the access panel, punching in codes with the muscle memory of 1,000 escapes. "Because in 10 minutes, we'll have half the conglomerate's fleet trying to turn us into stardust." The tube pressurized with a sharp hiss, and they tumbled into the Star Falcon 9's airlock. The familiar scent of recycled air and engine grease hit Jackson like a warm embrace, easing the knot in his shoulders. Home for whatever that was worth. "Lyra, prep us for an emergency exit," he called. "Already done," the AI's voice echoed through the ship's corridors, smug as ever. "I also filed a fake flight plan for the far side of the system. Should keep them guessing for a few minutes." They reached the cockpit, and Jackson slid into the pilot's seat, hands settling on the controls like an extension of his soul. Saris took the co-pilot's chair, her fingers moving over the unfamiliar console with surprising dexterity. "You can fly?" he asked, kicking off the startup sequence. "I can do many things, Mr. Cage," she said, her violet eyes flickering with something almost vulnerable, "including, it seems, dragging innocent humans into my messes." "I'm sorry for that. Bit late for apologies," he said, the engine's hum vibrating through his bones. "Besides, I haven't been innocent in a long damn time." "Docking clamps disengaged," Lyra reported. "Though fair warning, station controls blowing up our comms with some very aggressive demands." "Ignore them," Jackson said, his hands dancing across the controls. The Star Falcon 9 lifted off with a grace that defied her battered frame, slipping free of Aethera Station's grip. Through the viewport, the ion storm still raged, painting the void in surreal hues of blue and purple. They cleared the docking bay just as the first conglomerate patrol craft blinked onto the sensor's weapons already hot. Jackson threw the ship into a spiraling dive, using the station's bulk as a shield, a maneuver that would have shredded a lesser vessel. 3 more incoming series reported, her voice steady despite the crushing G-forces. "They're boxing us in, let them try," Jackson growled, pushing the engines to their limit, feeling the ship respond like a living creature, fierce and loyal. This was his element, not drowning in self-pity in some dive bar, but this the deadly waltz between life and death, where a split-second mistake meant oblivion. The first shots grazed their shields, energy crackling in radiant webs across the hull. Jackson rolled dove and climbed, turning their flight into a breathtaking ballet that kept them just beyond the enemy's targeting locks. The storm, Ceres said, suddenly, her voice cutting through the chaos. Take us into the storm. Are you insane? Ion storms? Eat ships for breakfast? They also scramble sensors and comms, she counters, her eyes locking onto his, revealing the commander beneath the fugitive. Trust me. Trust, a word so simple yet heavy with consequence. Hadn't he already trusted her? When he stood up in that bar, Jackson banked the Star Falcon toward the roiling wall of electromagnetic fury and slammed the throttles wide open. The storm swallowed them whole, a living beast of chaos. Inside, it was like piloting through the birth of a star. Energy crackled across the hull. Instruments screamed nonsense, and the viewports blazed with sheets of blue-white wrath. The ship bucked wildly, fighting Jackson's control as magnetic fields clawed at her frame. Shields at 60%, Lyra warned, her voice warped by interference. 50, 40, structural integrities, I know. Jackson snapped, sweat beating on his brow as he wrestled the controls. Beside him, Ceres had closed her eyes, lips moving in what might have been a prayer or a calculation, her face serene amidst the madness. Then, as abruptly as it began, it was over. They burst through the storm's far side into clear space, the patrol craft left floundering in the tempest's embrace. On the sensors, Aetheris Station was a fading speck, the conglomerate forces still tangled in the storm's grip. Jackson slumped back, adrenaline giving way to bone-deep exhaustion. We made it, he breathed. Yes, Ceres said, opening her eyes, which seemed to glow in the cockpit's dim light like twin stars in the void. Though this is just the opening act. Beginning of what exactly? The weight of his decision settled over him like a cold fog. I'd love to know what I've signed up for. She stared out at the stars, her silence heavy with the burden of worlds. When she spoke, her voice carried a gravity that anchored him. Tell me, Mr. Cade, what do you know about the Ethereum crisis? It's bad and getting worse. Supplies choke prices through the roof. Independent stations dying. He shrugged, trying to keep it light. The usual. The conglomerate claims its natural scarcity, she said, turning to face him, her expression fierce. They're lying. The phase wells are brimming as they always have been. But certain players have realized controlling Ethereum means controlling the galaxy itself. Tomorrow, the Security Council votes on a charter that would enshrine their monopoly. Jackson felt the realization hit like a kinetic round. The refugee routes. They'll decide who lives and who dies. Exactly. She leaned back, exhaustion etching lines in her regal features. I've spent months gathering evidence, building alliances, trying to fight this through proper channels. But someone betrayed me to the conglomerate. That arrest warrant wasn't about justice, Jackson said, piecing it together. It was about silencing you before the vote. Yes. Her smile was brittle, not reaching her eyes. The plan. First, we stay free long enough to broadcast my evidence. Second, we reach the luminous spire before the vote. Third, she paused, a flicker of humor breaking through. We convince the Security Council that justice outweighs the conglomerate's credits. Jackson laughed, a dry, disbelieving sound. That's all I thought. You were going to ask for something hard. Your sarcasm's noted, she said, but a genuine smile softened her face, transforming it into something breathtaking. Fair warning, though, things will get worse before they get better. The conglomerate has resources, influence, and every reason to want us dead. You sure you're in? He considered it for 2 heartbeats. Princess, I've been running from my past for 2 years. Maybe it's time I ran towards something. I'm not a princess, she corrected, her tone, mock serious. Crown blood is more like an inherited military rank than royalty. Too late. You're princess in my head now. Insufferable human, demanding alien. They locked eyes, tension sparking, then dissolved into laughter that felt like a release, a rare moment of lightness. When had he last laughed like that? Coordinates set for the luminous spire, Lyra announced. Transit time at max, sustainable speed 18 hours. But we're low on supplies. Food stores were already thin, and now we've got an extra mouth. I don't eat much, Ceres said. Wait till you try my cooking, Jackson warned. You might rethink that. As the Star Falcon 9 leapt into hyperspace, leaving Aetheris Station's chaos behind, Jackson studied his unexpected passenger. Those violet eyes held layers, mysteries deeper than politics or Ethereum. That kiss had been strategic, sure, some Aurelian bioauthentication trick, but there was something else in it, something that set his pulse racing when her gaze met his. Thank you, she said softly, for trusting me, for helping me. You didn't have to. He focused on the controls, deflecting the gratitude. Ask me again when we're not dodging plasma bolts. I will, she said, and it sounded like a vow. Outside, hyperspace flowed past in rivers of light, carrying them toward an uncertain future. The conglomerate would be mobilizing their vast resources, hunting them. Ahead lay the luminous spire, and a vote that could reshape millions of lives. Jackson Cade, washed-up soldier turned fugitive, let a small smile curve his lips. He'd wanted a purpose, a reason to keep flying. Be careful what you wish for. So he said, settling in for the long haul, tell me about this evidence, and maybe explain that kiss because my implants are still freaking out. Saris laughed, a sound like starlight breaking through a storm. Oh, Mr. Cade, that was just the start of your education in Aurelian ways. By the time we reach the spire, you'll be practically fluent. Why does that feel more like a threat than a promise? Because you're learning. She summoned a holographic display data streams, cascading between them like a digital waterfall. Now let me show you what the conglomerate's hiding and why they're terrified of the truth. As she spoke, her voice alive with passion and precision, Jackson was pulled into a conspiracy that stretched to the galaxy's highest echelons. The Ethereum crisis wasn't just about resources, it was about power control and the question of who got to shape the future among the stars. And somehow, impossibly, a burned-out pilot and an Aurelian commander were the only ones standing in its way. No pressure, Lyra, he said, as Saris continued to run a full systems diagnostic. Something tells me we're going to need every edge we can get. Something tells me we're going to need every trick in the book, Jackson said, his voice taut, as he leaned into the controls of the Star Falcon 9. Already on it, Lyra replied through the ship's speakers, her tone brimming with digital confidence. And for what it's worth, I think you made the right call. She seems trustworthy for an alien who kicked off your partnership by hijacking your biometric data through a kiss. That's what that was, Jackson asked, his mind still snagged on the electric memory of Saris's lips. Among other things, Lyra said, Aurelian info transfer is a wild ride. 17 chemical markers detected, each carrying encrypted data. Fascinating stuff. Lyra, shut up, Jackson muttered, but part of him couldn't let go of that moment in the shattered rim. The raw desperation in Saris's violet eyes, the electric spark of her kiss, the way she'd said his name like it was a lifeline she'd been searching for across the stars. There was more to her story, more to her, and despite every survival instinct screaming, he was diving headfirst into a supernova. Jackson couldn't wait to unravel it. The hyperspace jump ended with a gut-wrenching lurch, spitting the Star Falcon 9 into normal space on the edge of the Solaris drift. Through the viewport, the cosmic phenomenon blazed like a river of molten gold, its gravitational eddies forming a treacherous barrier between the core worlds and the rim territories. Beautiful Saris murmured, her violet eyes catching the stellar fire glowing like twin galaxies. And deadly. The drifts claimed more ships than any war, which is why we're not going through it, Jackson said, cross-checking their position against the nav charts. We'll skirt the edge, use the gravity wells to cloak our signature. Should buy us a few hours before the conglomerate sniffs us out. Clever, she said, her tone laced with approval, as she summoned another holographic display, an intricate web of data streams pulsing like a living thing. While you fly, let me show you the real enemy we're up against. The display shifted, revealing a map of known space Ethereum deposits marked in glowing blue. At first, it resembled the standard resource chart every pilot knew by heart. But as Saris layered and classified geological surveys from the past decade, the truth erupted like a star going nova. The blue dots multiplied, spreading across the map like a contagion, revealing abundance where official records screamed scarcity. My God, Jackson breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. There's enough Ethereum to last centuries. Millennia, Saris's expression hardened, her jaw tight with controlled fury. The conglomerate's been hiding deposits, torching survey records, even sabotaging active wells, all to manufacture a crisis. Why, Jackson asked. They're already drowning in credits. It's not just wealth anymore, she said, zooming in on the refugee routes, fragile lifelines threading through war-torn systems to safe harbors. Every ship needs Ethereum for FTL travel. Control the fuel, and you control who moves, who trades, who lives. The conglomerate isn't just building a monopoly, they're forging an empire. Lyra's voice cut through the tension. Hate to crash the economics seminar, but we've got company. 3 ships just dropped out of hyperspace running silent, but definitely hunting. Jackson's hands flew across the controls, throttling the engines to a whisper and engaging every stealth system the Starfalcon 9 had. Through the viewport, he saw the conglomerate vessel's sleek, predatory shapes in jet black, their sensor arrays sweeping the void like ravenous searchlights. "Can they spot us?" Saris asked, her voice steady despite the rising stakes. "Not if luck's on our side," Jackson said, eyes locked on the sensor patterns timing their sweeps. "Lyra, can you whip up a ghost signal, something to throw them off?" "Already on it," the AI replied. "Though FYI, our food situation's dire. 6 hours of rations left, and that's if you're cool with nutrient paste that went bad 2 months ago." "One crisis at a time," Jackson muttered, freezing as one of the hunters turned their way. The sensor sweep washed over them like an invisible tide, and for a heart-stopping moment Jackson was sure they had been pinged, but the ship veered off, chasing Lyra's decoy signal toward an asteroid cluster. They held their breath in tense silence until the conglomerate vessels were mere specks on the scope. Jackson eased the engines back online, guiding the Starfalcon 9 along the Solaris Drift's edge like a shadow, its gravitational chaos masking their trail. "That was too damn close," Saris said, exhaling. "They're mobilizing faster than I expected." "Yeah, well, kissing me in front of a bar full of witnesses wasn't exactly subtle," Jackson teased, glancing at her. She had the grace to look slightly sheepish. "The bioauthentication was necessary. I had to transfer encryption keys without risking electronic interception. The conglomerates got quantum sniffers on every data stream, and a handshake wouldn't do?" Jackson raised an eyebrow. "Aurelian bioauthentication needs significant genetic exchange," she explained, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Saliva's the most efficient medium. Also, you look like you needed kissing." Jackson nearly sent them careening into a gravity well. You had the look of someone who'd forgotten how it feels to be surprised by life," she said, turning back to her displays, but not before he caught the soft flush in her cheeks. "My people have a saying: the universe rewards the bold and punishes the stagnant. Mine say don't kiss strange aliens in bars," Jackson shot back. "Really no, but we should." Her laugh filled the cockpit warm and unguarded, and Jackson found himself grinning despite the danger. When was the last time he'd traded real banter, not the hollow camaraderie of military life, or the empty chatter of station bars, but this, a connection that sparked like a live wire? "There," Sari said suddenly, pointing to a blip on the nav display. "Void Bazaar. It's off the official charts, but traders have used it for decades. We can resupply there." Jackson studied the coordinates. The station perched perilously close to the drift's edge in a pocket of stable space that defied logic. "That's either genius engineering or sheer stupidity." "Both usually," Sari said with a wry smile. "Welcome to the Rim territories." They approached Void Bazaar, cautiously broadcasting old smuggler codes Lyra had dredged up from her vast archives. The station emerged slowly, first as a sensor flicker, then as a chaotic jumble of metal and composite, like a dozen structures had crashed together and decided to coexist. Charming Jackson muttered, easing them toward what he hoped was a docking port. With Void Bazaar, nothing was certain. The docking bay was organized chaos ships of every shape and state of disrepair, crammed together like metallic fish in a can. Beings from a dozen species hustled cargo with the urgency of those who knew every second was credits. The air as they cycled through the airlock reeked of ozone and desperation, with a faint whiff of something that might pass for food if you squinted. "Stay close," Jackson advised, guiding Saris through the throng. "And try to look less like what?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Like you're wearing a fortune in Aurelian bioweave armor under those civvies." She glanced at her outfit, surprised. "It's that obvious?" "To someone who's been shot at as much as I have, yeah," Jackson said. "The way it moves, too fluid, too responsive for normal fabric." "You're sharp, Mr. Cage," she said, testing his name like a fine wine. "Call me Jackson. If we're running for our lives together, first names seem fair, Jackson." Then she said, her voice softening, "And you can call me Saris, though my full name takes 6 minutes and includes my entire maternal lineage. I'll stick with Saris." They found a vendor who took untraceable credits and asked no questions, stocking up on enough supplies to last a week. Jackson was mid-haggle over water reclamation tablets when Saris stiffened beside him. "What's wrong?" he asked, hand drifting to his concealed sidearm. That broadcast screen, she said, nodding toward a grimy display flickering with RIM news. Listen, a human announcer with the polished perfection of a propaganda puppet was mid-report. A terrorist attack on Ethereum reserves at Fortis Prime has left thousands stranded without FTL fuel. Aurelian extremists linked to rogue commander Saris Vera have claimed responsibility. Lies, Saris hissed, her fist clenched tight enough to crack steel. Fortis Prime's wells dried up years ago. The conglomerate shut them down themselves. Yeah, but who's going to fact-check them, Jackson said, wrapping up the deal quickly, eager to escape the screen's glare. Come on, the longer we linger, the easier we are to track. But as they turned to leave, a familiar figure blocked their path. Zane Corrin, ex-Earth Defense Corps, and now the closest thing Void Bazaar had to a mayor, stood with arms crossed, a knowing grin on his weathered face. Jackson Cade, he drawled. Should have known you'd wash up here eventually. But bringing Aurelian royalty? That's a new one, Zane Jackson said, keeping his tone neutral, hand still near his weapon. Been a while. 2 years, 3 months, 6 days. Zane said, his smile unwavering, but his eyes hard as asteroid rock. Not that I'm counting. You know, after you vanished from Starvale Breach without a word. It wasn't like that. Save it. Zane raised a hand, then broke into a grin. Water under the bridge, brother, though you owe me a drink. Several drinks. Maybe a whole damn distillery. The conglomerate series began. Can kiss my rim-born ass, Zane finished, spitting to the side. Pardon the language, Your Highness, but out here we've got no love for those credit-sucking leeches. They've been bleeding us dry for years, and now they want to make it law. We've got proof, Sarah said, her voice steady but edged with urgency. But we need to know how deep this conspiracy runs. Zane Corrin's laugh was a harsh, humorless bark. How deep, lady, it's carved into the galaxy's bedrock. Every major trade guild, half the military contractors, probably 2/3 of the Security Council, they've been weaving this web for years. He summoned a holographic display, a tangle of intercepted comms and financial records flickering like a dying star. We've been tracking their moves out here in the Rim. Mysterious accidents at independent Ethereum wells. Supply convoys vanishing into the void. Refugee ships turned away from ports because they can't pay the conglomerate's new fees. Saris's eyes narrowed. The botnet attacks, she said, her voice sharp with realization. We've traced massive algorithmic tampering in the core world's data streams, amplifying xenophobic rhetoric, turning entire populations against refugees. Exactly, Zane said, leaning forward, his weathered face grim. Create the crisis, then sell the solution. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial growl. But here's the kicker. It's not just the conglomerate. They've got allies inside the Aurelian Dominion. High-level allies. Cirrus froze, her violet eyes hardening to amethyst. Impossible. My people would never... Your people are no different from anyone else's, Zane cut in. Some are heroes, some are scum, most just want to survive. And a few they'll sell out their own species for a slice of the pie. Proof, Jackson demanded, his hand still hovering near his sidearm. Working on it, Zane said. But your stunt at Aetheris Station kicked the hornet's nest. They've sped up their timeline. That vote tomorrow, it was supposed to be next month. They're panicking because they're scared. Scared of what? Her Jackson nodded toward Saris. Zane's eyes locked onto her, steady and unyielding. Of what she stands for. Unity across species. Military power that credits can't buy. The conglomerate can't handle someone they can't corrupt. Lyra's voice crackled through Jackson's neural implant, low and urgent. We've got trouble. Multiple ships converging on the station. No IFF signals, but their energy signatures scream conglomerate hunter-killers. Time to move, Jackson said, standing, adrenaline spiking. Zane, we need... Already on it, Zane interrupted, his fingers flying across multiple interfaces. Emergency protocols are live. We'll buy you as much time as we can. Why help us? Saris asked, her gaze piercing. Zane met her eyes, his voice steady as stone. 20 years ago, a conglomerate efficiency expert decided my home colony wasn't profitable enough. They cut our Ethereum supply and left 40,000 people to choke. An Aurelian relief ship saved us. Saved me. He stood, offering his hand. So yeah, I'll help you burn those bastards down. metaphorically speaking. They shook, and Jackson felt a flicker of something he hadn't since Starvale Breach. The sense of standing shoulder to shoulder in a fight that mattered. There's a back route out of the docking bay, Zane said, already moving. Through the maintenance tunnels. It's not pretty, but it beats eating plasma bolts. He tapped his wrist device. I'm sending all our intel to your ship. They sprinted through corridors that grew narrower and more decrepit until they were crawling through maintenance ducts unwatched. Since Void Bazaar's construction, behind them the distant clatter of combat echoed station security buying time with their lives. Almost there, Lyra announced as they reached a service hatch. But the hunter-killers are already in position. The second we launch, they'll be on us. Can we outrun them? Saros asked, slipping through the hatch with a grace that belied her armor. Not in open space, Jackson said, his mind racing through dwindling options. They're faster, better armed. He met her eyes, seeing his own reckless plan mirrored in her gaze. Unless, how do you feel about flying through the Solaris Drift? I thought you said it was suicide. It is, he admitted, but it's slightly less suicidal than facing 3 hunter-killers in a ship held together by spit and hope. Saras's dry laugh was sharp as a blade. Your human optimism is inspiring. But she was already strapping into the co-pilot's seat as they reached the Star Falcon 9. The launch sequence felt like an eternity, each second stretching as Jackson powered up systems knowing the hunter-killers were watching, waiting for them to clear Void Bazaar's defenses. Hold on, he warned, then slammed the engines to life. The Star Falcon 9 shot from the docking bay like a loosed arrow, and space erupted in a deadly light show. Energy beams and kinetic rounds tore through the void, beautiful and lethal. Shields holding Lyra reported her voice strained. But not for long. They're using phase-modulated energy, ripping through our defenses like paper. The Drift Sari said, her voice urgent. Now Jackson. He didn't hesitate, banking hard to starboard and pointing the ship's nose at the roiling chaos of the Solaris Drift, throttles wide open. The drift swallowed them like a ravenous beast. Inside space itself defied physics. Gravity yanked in 6 directions, time warped and stuttered. The Star Falcon 9's instruments went haywire, spitting impossible readings. Navigation scrambled, Era said, her tone edging toward panic, a rarity for an AI. I can't plot a course through this. Then don't. Jackson said, shutting down the flight computer and gripping the manual controls. Sometimes you gotta feel your way. Feel your way. Saris clutched her armrests as the ship bucked like a wild stallion. Through a phenomenon that kills 90% of ships, would you rather face the hunter-killers? A massive gravitational wave slammed into them, sending the ship spinning. Through the viewport, Jackson caught glimpses of their pursuers, one already fracturing its hull, splintering under the drift's forces. Another fired wildly, but the beams twisted in the warped space, boomeranging back to their source. There, Saris pointed at a faint ribbon of stable space on the scope, threading through the chaos. Can you reach it? Watch me, Jackson said, pouring everything into the maneuver. His hands moved on instinct, years of piloting, distilled into split-second reactions. The ship groaned something vital, snapping loose in the rear with a sickening crash. The shields flickered and died, leaving them exposed to the drift's wrath. But they made it. The ribbon of calm enveloped them like a lover's embrace, and suddenly they could breathe again. Behind them, the last hunter-killer tried to follow, only to be crushed between colliding gravity wells like a tin can. We're clear, Lyra said, relief flooding her voice. Though we've lost 30% hull integrity, the port stabilizer's toast, and I'm pretty sure the coffee maker just gained sentience and declared independence. The coffee maker, Jackson asked, too drained to process that. It's been a rough day, Lyra said dryly. They drifted in the calm pocket, assessing the damage, as the drift's eternal dance of creation and destruction raged outside, beautiful and terrifying. That was incredible, Sarah said softly, her voice cutting through the cockpit's quiet. I've seen veteran pilots who couldn't have pulled that off. Jackson ran a trembling hand through his hair, exhaustion settling in. Yeah, well, staring down death is a hell of a motivator. No, she said, turning to face him, her violet eyes holding something he couldn't name. That wasn't just skill or desperation. You read the drift, felt its patterns. How he paused, old memories clawing to the surface. My grandmother was a void navigator, old school, before computers took over jump calculations. She said space was like music, you can't force it to your rhythm. You find its beat and dance along. She sounds wise, Sarah said. She was Jackson said, a sad smile tugging at his lips. The conglomerate bought her shipping company when I was 12. Fired all the human navigators, said AIs were cheaper. She died 6 months later. Said life wasn't worth living if she couldn't fly. I'm sorry, ancient history. He turned back to the controls, deflecting the sympathy. We need to keep moving. The drift will hide us for now, but we've got to find a way out. Jackson Sarah set her hand on his arm, stopping him. Thank you for trusting your instincts, for saving us. Don't thank me yet, he said, his voice gruff. We've still got to reach the luminous spire, stop a vote, and take down a conspiracy that's got its claws in the galaxy's core, all with a ship held together by spit and hope. Her smile transformed her face regal, giving way to radiant. You forgot the most important part. What's that, a pilot who dances with space itself, she said, squeezing his arm gently. And a princess who's damn glad she kissed him in a bar. Before Jackson could respond, Lyra cut in, her tone suspiciously close to a cough. Sorry to ruin the moment, but we've got incoming transmissions from Void Bazaar. Zane made it out, but the station took heavy losses. He sent all their intel on the conglomerate conspiracy. Display it, Sarah's commanded, snapping back to military mode. Data flooded the screen's financial records, intercepted comm shipping manifests, painting a portrait of corruption deeper than Jackson had imagined. But the final file stopped them cold. Those are classified Aurelian military deployments. Sarah breathed, her voice tight with disbelief. How did the conglomerate get these? Jackson studied the data, his tactical mind racing. They didn't just get them. Check the timestamps. These are predictive models. Someone's feeding them your military's plans in real time. A traitor, Sarah said, her voice cold as the void. High-ranking with access to command-level intel. When we find out who, Jackson corrected, emphasizing the partnership. We're in this together now. She looked at him, a long, searching gaze, then nodded. Together. As they charted a course out of the drift toward the distant, luminous spire, Jackson's thoughts turned to patterns. The pattern of the drift that had saved them. The pattern of conspiracy threatening countless lives. And the pattern of his own life, which had led him from a bar on Aethera Station to this cockpit beside an Aurelian commander who might just be the galaxy's last hope. His grandmother was right, space was music, and they were dancing on a knife's edge. The luminous spire rose from the void like a crystalline spear piercing the cosmos. Its facets caught starlight, shattering it into 1,000 prismatic fragments, each housing the offices, courtrooms, and bureaucratic gears that held interstellar civilization together. At its peak, the Security Council's high chamber waited, a spider at the heart of a vast web. Impressive, Jackson murmured, guiding the battered Starfalcon 9 toward the assigned approach vector. After the drift, the ship looked like it had brawled with an asteroid field and lost. Compensating for something, you think the spire was built by the precedent species, Saris explained, her fingers dancing over a holographic interface as she reviewed their legal strategy one last time. It was here when the first alliance formed. Some say it's older than any living civilization. And they just let us use it. No precedent remains or tech have ever been found, she said, glancing at him. Just structures like this, waiting like courtrooms built for cases we hadn't yet dreamed up. Lyra's voice broke in, docking controls asking for ID. They're also suggesting our hull integrity might be better suited for the salvage yards. Tell them we're here on Security Council business, Ceres commanded. Authorization code Aurelius 99 Whiskey Tango. Lyra chuckled. Now they're asking if we know that code was reported stolen 6 hours ago by a dangerous fugitive. Jackson grinned despite himself. Your reputation's beating us to the punch, princess. This isn't funny, Sarah snapped through a twitch at her mouth, betrayed her. We need to dock. The emergency session starts in 3 hours. Leave it to me, Jackson said, opening the comms. Docking control, this is Captain Cade of the Starfalcon 9. I'm carrying Commander Vera, who's got critical evidence on the Ethereum crisis. Let us dock or explain to the Council why you turned away the one person who can stop a galactic catastrophe. Your call, but I'd make it quick. Our hull's not exactly inspiring confidence. You can either let us dock, Jackson said, his voice steady over the comms, or explain to the Council why you blocked the one person who can stop a humanitarian disaster. Your call, but I'd decide fast. Our hull's hanging by a thread, as you pointed out. A tense pause stretched across the void. Then the response crackled through. Proceed to Docking Bay 94. Security will meet you. Any aggressive moves will be met with lethal force. Charming welcome, Jackson muttered. Initiating the docking sequence with practiced ease. More than I expected, Saris admitted, her violet eyes scanning the readouts. Someone on the council wants to hear us out. The docking bay was a clash of worlds. Sleek diplomatic shuttles gleamed beside battle-scarred cruisers, while maintenance crews from a dozen species worked with quiet precision. The Star Falcon 9, battered and bruised, looked like a stray mutt at a high-class kennel show. Security was waiting as promised, two squads in full tactical gear, weapons not quite aimed but unmistakably ready. The officer in charge, a stern-faced woman with augmented muscles that screamed, "Special Forces, step forward." "Commander Vera, Captain Cade. I'm Colonel Maratile, Spire Security. You're coming with us, under arrest." Saris asked, her tone daring the answer to be yes. "Protective custody," Tile replied, choosing her words carefully. 3 assassination attempts on council members in the past week. We're not taking chances. They were escorted through corridors that felt like a separate reality carved from the same crystalline material as the luminous spire's exterior. Here the walls flowed in organic curves, subtly guiding the eye and easing their steps in a way that felt almost alive. Jackson had to focus to resist the architecture's gentle nudge on his movements. The precedents knew their mind games, he observed half to himself. Among other things, Tile agreed. The spire's got a knack for encouraging truth. Something in its resonance frequencies makes lying feel like swallowing glass, handy for a courthouse. You'd think so, Jackson said, but politicians have a way of believing their own bullshit first. Tile's lips twitched, but she didn't comment. The council chamber was a vast spherical arena at the spire's core where delegates floated in a 3-dimensional grid, their positions a dance of power and protocol. Holographic displays flickered between them like neural sparks, weaving a web of arguments, data and persuasion that pulsed with life. "The emergency session's already underway," Tile said, guiding them to a secure viewing chamber. "You'll be called when it's time to present your evidence." Through the transparent wall, the debate raged like a storm. A stellar conglomerate representative, a human with aggressive gestures that screamed overcompensation, was mid-speech. "The terrorist attack on Fortis Prime proves the danger of unrestricted Ethereum access. Our management proposal ensures security stability and distribution based on verified need, not political favoritism." "Lies wrapped in red tape," Saris muttered, her fists clenching, nails biting into her palms. Delegates responded with a mix of skepticism and support, their voices a cacophony of interstellar politics. Jackson tried to track the alliances, but the chamber's layout seemed designed to obscure clear majorities. "Who are the key players?" he asked, leaning closer to Saris. She pointed to figures floating in the sphere. "Judge Arya Solon of the Arbitration Court. Neutral in theory, but she's been tilting toward the conglomerate lately. Ambassador Zoran of the Kalari Union, historically anti-monopoly, but squeezed by trade sanctions. The Terran rep is Admiral Clara Venson." Jackson's blood ran cold. "Venson? You mean Clara Venson? You know her," Saris said, studying his face. "She was my CO," he said, jaw tightening. "The one who ordered us to abandon the refugees at Starvale Breach." His voice dropped, heavy with old wounds. "Of course she's in this." Saris's gaze softened, but her words were pragmatic. "Personal history aside, she's a swing vote. If we can sway her, we can't." Jackson cut in. "Trust me, Clara Venson only backs winners. Right now, that's whoever's got the most credits. Then we make sure it's us," Cerise said, her voice steel-wrapped resolve. Lyra's voice crackled through their implants, urgent and low. "Heads up, I'm picking up heavy electronic warfare in the chamber. Someone's screwing with the translation systems and vote tallies." "Can you trace it?" Saris asked. "On it," Lyra said, "but this is military-grade quantum encryption. Sophisticated as hell." "Oh, that's bad." What Jackson demanded, "The signal's coming from inside the Aurelian delegation suite." Saris went still, her face a mask of icy fury. Then, without warning, she surged toward the chamber entrance, her strides radiating a determination that parted seasoned soldiers like a ship cutting through fog. Jackson caught up just as she reached the security checkpoint. "I invoke right of direct address," she declared, her voice ringing with authority. "As crown blood of the Aurelian Dominion and an affected party in these proceedings." The guards exchanged uneasy glances. "Commander, you're flagged as a security risk," one said. I'm flagged as a victim of a conglomerate frame job. And you know it. Sarah shot back, stepping closer, her presence filling the space like a supernova. Check your regulations. Right of direct address can't be denied to ranking officers presenting evidence of war crimes. War crimes, a guard asked, hesitant. What else do you call starving entire populations for profit? The checkpoint's legal algorithm churned through protocols, then flashed green with a reluctant hum. The massive chamber doors irised open, exhaling a sound like a held breath released. The debate halted mid-sentence as Sarah strode into the spherical chamber, Jackson at her heels. Every delegate turned, and the silence was a deafening void. I invoke right of direct address, Saris repeated, her voice carrying to every corner, amplified by the spire's flawless acoustics. And I charge the stellar conglomerate with conspiracy to commit genocide through artificial Ethereum scarcity. The chamber erupted in a torrent of voices, a chaotic symphony of outrage and disbelief. Director Torrin Klein, the conglomerate's representative, vibrated with fury, his nameplate glinting in the chamber's light. This is irregular. The terrorist Vera has no standing. I have every standing. Saris cut him off, her voice, a blade slicing through the noise. As do the 3 million refugees stranded without Ethereum access. Or would you prefer they speak for themselves? I can arrange a live feed from the convoy ships, let the council see children dying, while you haggle over profit margins. Judge Arya Solon raised a hand, and the chamber's acoustic dampeners snapped on, silencing all but her. Commander Vera, these are grave accusations. I assume you have evidence. I do, Sarah said, gesturing. Holographic displays bloomed around her, a cascade of damning data, geological surveys proving Ethereum abundance, financial records exposing market manipulation, intercepted comms detailing orchestrated shortages. Fabrications, Klein declared, his voice dripping with scorn. Desperate lies from an officer facing corruption charges. Then let's talk about the Fortis Prime attack, Sarah said smoothly, her tone lethal in its calm. The one you pinned on Aurelian extremists. Tell me, Director, how did terrorists destroy wells that have been dry for 3 years? Were they time-traveling terrorists, perhaps? Murmurs rippled through the delegates, unease spreading like a virus. Klein's face flushed a vivid purple. Furthermore, Sarah's continued manipulating the displays to reveal shipping records. I can prove Ethereum from those destroyed wells was sold on black markets at inflated prices. The conglomerate didn't just lie, they profited. Circumstantial, Klein sputtered. Which is why I've brought a witness, Sarah said, turning to Jackson. Captain Cade was at Starvale Breach when conglomerate policies led to civilian deaths. His testimony is inadmissible, Admiral Clara Venson interrupted, floating forward in her designated space. Jackson's chest tightened at the sight of her, same iron gray hair, same cold eyes that weighed lives like ledger entries. Captain Cade is a deserter who abandoned his post. His word carries no weight here. I resign, Jackson said, his voice cutting through the tension. After you ordered us to let refugees die because saving them wasn't in the mission parameters. You disobeyed direct orders and compromised operational security, Venson said, her tone cold enough to freeze a star. Your emotional instability saved 600 lives. Jackson finished, his voice steady despite the old rage burning in his chest. Yeah, I'm real torn up about that. Enough, Judge Solon commanded, her voice a gavel strike. The chair acknowledges the high tensions, but decorum must be maintained. Commander Vera, do you have more evidence beyond Captain Cade's testimony? This was the moment. Saris took a breath, and Jackson saw the calculation in her eyes, a gamble that could either save them or doom them. I do, she said finally. But first I must address a more immediate threat. There's a traitor in this chamber feeding classified Aurelian military intelligence to the conglomerate in real time. The silence that followed was absolute, as if the chamber itself held its breath. That's a serious accusation, Solon said, her voice cautious. Yes, it is, Saris replied, turning slowly to scan the Aurelian delegation. Which is why I demand immediate neural verification of all delegates with security clearance. Outrageous. The protest came from General Voris Kael, an older Aurelian with ornate rank insignia, his voice thick with old nobility and older grudges. Jackson recognized him from briefings, a relic of tradition, unyielding and proud. You dare question our loyalty? I question anyone who puts profit over people, Sarah said coolly, unless you've got a reason to dodge verification. This is a fishing expedition, Klein interjected, scrambling to regain control. A desperate distraction from the real issues. The real issue, Jackson cut in stepping forward, his voice raw with conviction, is that you're all so caught up in politics you're blind to the crisis. I've seen the refugee ships packed so tight people can't breathe, running on fumes because Ethereum costs more than food. Children born in cargo holds who've never seen a planet because their parents can't afford docking fees. He turned, addressing the entire chamber. You want to talk terrorism? Terror is knowing your life hinges on a resource made scarce by greed. Terror is watching your homeworld's economy collapse because one corporation decided it wasn't profitable enough. Terror is terror, Lyra interrupted through his implant, her voice sharp with alarm, is the explosive device I just detected in the chamber's atmospheric processing unit. 2 minutes until it goes off and things get very exciting. Jackson's blood turned to ice. He caught Saris's eyes, seeing the same dread dawn in her face. This wasn't just about rigging a vote. Someone was ready to wipe out the entire Security Council. Clear the chamber, Saris commanded, her military training snapping into place. Everyone out now. You have no authority, Klein began, his voice shrill. There's a bomb in the air system, Jackson shouted, already shoving through the crowd toward the device's location. Unless you want to argue jurisdiction while choking move, panic erupted, delegates scattering in a frenzy, dignity abandoned. Security forces flooded in, adding to the chaos. Lyra, guide me, Jackson said, pushing through the throng. Upper-level third atmosphere intake, Lyra replied. It's small but nasty, a binary aerosol weapon. If it goes off, everyone here's dead in seconds. Jackson reached the intake panel, tearing it open with desperate strength. Nestled among the circulation fans was a device the size of his fist, its status lights blinking in a menacing countdown, like the heartbeat of a predator. Can you disarm it? Not remotely, Lyra said. Someone's got to physically disconnect it. Jackson, don't. But he was already reaching in, fingers brushing the device's warm, almost living metal, its vibrations pulsing through his bones. Talk me through it, he said, forcing his voice steady. There should be 3 wires, red, blue, and shit. They're all black. Someone's got a sick sense of humor. Lyra, sorry. Scanning the AI, said, her voice sharp with focus. There, the middle wires got a different polymer composition. Cut that one. Jackson pulled his utility knife, his hand steady despite the countdown timer flashing 30 seconds in his peripheral vision. He isolated the middle wire, took a deep breath, and sliced. Silence followed. Good nothing or bad nothing, he asked, voice tight. Checking, Ira said. Good nothing, the countdown stopped. But there's a secondary. Before she could finish, the device sprouted needle-thin appendages, lashing toward Jackson's exposed hand like venomous tendrils. He jerked back, but one grazed his skin, leaving a burning streak. Poison, Lyra reported unnecessarily. Analyzing, it's a paralytic. You've got maybe 5 minutes before what, Jackson demanded, though the numbness creeping up his arm already answered. For your lungs shut down, Lyra said. Well, shit, Jackson muttered, sliding down the wall as his legs buckled. His vision blurred, but through the haze he saw Sarah shoving through the panicked crowd, her violet eyes wide with fear, not for politics or the vote, but for him. The antidote, she said, voice trembling as she yanked a hypo spray from her armor's medical kit. Hold on, Jackson, just hold on. The injector pressed against his neck, cold and sharp, unleashing a fire that surged through his veins, clashing with the poison's icy grip in a brutal war within his body. He gasped, convulsing as the chemicals battled. Stay with me, Saris commanded, cupping his face, her hands steady despite her racing pulse. That's an order, soldier. Not your soldier, he gritted out, teeth clenched against the pain. You are now, she said, pulling him against her. He could feel her heart pounding through her bioweave armor. You don't get to die on me, Jackson Cade. Not when we're this close. The antidote won barely. Sensation flooded back into his limbs, chased by a pain so sharp it made him long for the numbness. But he was alive, breathing, and Saris held him like he might vanish if she let go. The bomb, he asked weakly. Contained, she said, helping him sit up, her touch gentle but firm. Security's got it. That was stupid as hell, she added, her voice soft but pointed. You're welcome. And brave, she said quietly. Stupidly brave. My specialty, Jackson said, managing a weak grin. Around them, the chamber slowly regained order. Security had sealed the exits, scanning delegates for weapons and toxins. The bombing attempt had shifted everything. Attempted mass murder had a way of sharpening priorities. Judge Arya Solon floated back to her position, visibly shaken but resolute. "This session will continue," she declared. "But first I want answers. Who planted that device?" "Someone desperate to bury the truth," Sarah said, helping Jackson to his feet, her grip steadying him. "Someone with access to military-grade explosives and chamber security codes." Colonel Maratile entered, her expression grim. "The device is Aurelian-made, but its triggering mechanism is conglomerate tech. A joint effort." Impossible Director Torrin Klein and General Voris Kale said in unison, then shot each other venomous glares. Actually, Lyra's voice rang through the chamber's speakers, dripping with cheer. "Entirely possible. I've traced those encrypted signals. Care to guess which delegates have been chatting off-record for the past 6 months?" "That's classified data," Klein protested. "So is bombing the Security Council." "Judge," Solon said dryly. "Proceed AI." Lyra projected a holographic web at the chamber's center, lines of illicit communications weaving between delegates. The thickest strands converged on 2 nodes, Klein and Kyle. "Congratulations," Lyra said, her tone mockingly bright. "You've been conspiring together. Should I send wedding invitations?" "This is circumstantial," Kale began, his voice tight. "The explosive residue on your aide's hands isn't," Tyle interrupted. "We've arrested him. He's singing for a lighter sentence." Kale's face paled, while Klein's eyes darted like a trapped animal's. "The conspiracy runs deeper than we imagined," Suri said, addressing the chamber, her voice resonant with command. Conglomerate greed and Aurelian military ambition united to control Ethereum access. They'd have killed everyone here to keep the truth buried. "The truth that Ethereum is abundant," Jackson added, leaning slightly on Saris but finding his voice. "The truth that scarcity is a lie. The truth that people are dying for profit margins." Judge Solon studied the evidence, the web of connections, the faces of the accused. Her voice when she spoke carried the weight of final judgment. "In light of these revelations, I call for an immediate vote on Directive 742, the suspension of all Ethereum restrictions pending a full investigation of market manipulation and conspiracy charges." The vote was swift and unanimous, even from delegates who'd wavered before. Attempted murder had a way of clarifying morals. Furthermore, Solon continued, "I issue warrants for Director Klein and General Kyle on charges of conspiracy, attempted mass murder, and crimes against sentient beings. Commander Vera, the court acknowledges your service in exposing this conspiracy and formally withdraws all charges against you." Sarah straightened every inch, the commander, though she still supported Jackson's weight. "The Aurelian Dominion requests permission to aid the humanitarian effort. Our Crescent Armada stands ready to escort refugee convoys and ensure Ethereum distribution." "Granted," Solon said, turning to the chamber. "Let this be a lesson: when profit outweighs people, when power trumps justice, we all become victims. This council exists to stop such abuses, not enable them." "Pretty words," Klein sneered as security closed in. "But this isn't over. The conglomerate has resources you can't imagine. Legal teams that'll what?" Jackson cut in, his voice sharp despite his exhaustion. "Argue mass murder's a valid business strategy. Good luck." Klein's face twisted with rage. "You think you've won? You've only delayed the inevitable. Progress demands efficiency, and efficiency demands control. The weak always need the strong to lead." "Funny," Jackson said, his tone cold. "The weak were doing fine until you choked their fuel supply." As security hauled Klein and Kale away, the chamber erupted in frenetic activity. Delegates contacting their governments, emergency protocols kicking in, the galaxy's bureaucratic machinery grinding into motion. It would take time, Jackson knew: investigations, trials, implementation, but the first step was taken. "You need a medic," Sarah said, guiding him toward the exit. "I need a drink," Jackson corrected. "Several. Maybe a whole distillery." "After the medics clear you," she said, her tone firm but warm. "You're awfully bossy for someone who's not my CO. Didn't we establish you're my soldier now?" Her smile was like dawn breaking after an endless night. "Besides, someone's got to stop you from defusing bombs with your face." "That was my hand. Thank you," Jackson said, mock offended. "Next time, use someone else's hand." "Next time," he groaned. "Please tell me there won't be a next time." "Oh, Jackson," she said, as they reached the medical station where technicians began scanning him for residual toxins. We just exposed a conspiracy that's upended half the galaxy's economy. There's definitely a next time. Can't wait, he muttered, then caught her hand as she turned to leave. Saris, we did it. We did, she said, squeezing his hand, the electric spark from their first meeting flaring again. Thank you for believing me, for risking everything. Yeah, well, someone said the universe rewards the bold. Wise woman, she said, her smile softening. She has her moments. They stood hands clasped as medics worked around them with practiced patience. Then Saris leaned down, her lips brushing his forehead in a kiss soft as a whisper. Rest, she commanded. Tomorrow the real work begins, rebuilding, resettling refugees, forging new trade protocols, hunting the conspiracy's remnants. She straightened the weight of duty, settling on her shoulders, changing the galaxy's easy, making it stick. That's the hard part. As she left to coordinate with response teams, Jackson closed his eyes, letting the medics work. His body ached, his hand burned where the needle had struck, and he'd burned through lifetimes of luck and days. But they'd won against impossible odds, against ruthless enemies, against a system that valued profit over lives. Lyra, he said quietly, great work back there. I do my best, the AI replied, her modesty laced with smugness. Though your bomb-diffusing technique could use more finesse and fewer extremities. It worked, didn't it? By the slimmest margin, she said. Next time maybe use actual tools. Everyone's a critic, Jackson said, smiling despite himself. How's the ship still held together by spit and hope, Lyra said. But she'll fly. I've secured priority repairs under emergency provisions. We'll be space-worthy in 6 hours. Good, Jackson said, opening his eyes to the spire's controlled chaos. Something tells me we're going to need her. Through the medical bay's window, he saw ships departing, carrying news of the vote to every corner of civilized space. Ethereum routes would open, refugees would find homes, the conspiracy would unravel. But Lyra was right, this was just the start. Appeals, counter-moves, hidden conspirators, still lurking in power, a war fought with laws, not lasers, but a war all the same. And yet Jackson was ready for it. Rest periods over, the lead medic said. Toxins neutralized, but steer clear of alien needle attacks for at least a week. Noted, Jackson said, standing, testing his balance. Steady enough? He had a galaxy to fix and an Aurelian commander who'd probably appreciate an extra pair of hands. Leaving the medical bay, he found Admiral Clara Venson waiting in the corridor, looking older, worn by the weight of choices made and unmade. Jackson, she said simply. Admiral, he replied, bracing for a fight. Expecting an apology for Starvale breach? No, he said, meeting her gaze. I expect you to do better from now on. That's all any of us can do. She paused, then nodded sharply. The refugees you saved, they're thriving. Built a colony on New Arcadia, named their capital Cade's Landing. I didn't know, he said, caught off guard. Because you never asked, she said. Too busy drowning in guilt to check on the lives you saved. She turned to leave, then paused. You were right to disobey. I was wrong to give that order. For what it's worth. She walked away before he could respond, leaving him with a strange mix of closure and unease. The past couldn't be undone, but maybe it could be learned from. Jackson Saris's voice echoed down the hall. Stop brooding and get over here. We've got a humanitarian crisis to manage and 0 people who can coordinate military and civilian ships. Volunteer someone else, he called, but his feet were already moving toward her. I'm volunteering you, she said. Payback for making me worry when you decided to wrestle a bomb. I didn't wrestle it, he said, grinning. I performed precision technical manipulation. You stuck your hand in and hoped for the best, she shot back. That too, Jackson reached the command center, where Saris orchestrated a symphony of holographic displays, issuing orders with a seamless grace that turned chaos into art. She glanced at him, her violet eyes softening with a smile, and handed him a datapad. Convoy routes, she said. We need safe corridors for refugee ships, coordination with local governments for resettlement, and a way to fend off conglomerate subsidiaries trying to slap tolls on humanitarian aid. Business as usual, then, Jackson quipped, scanning the pad. Unfortunately, she said, turning back to her displays before pausing. Jackson, I'm glad you're okay. Me too, he admitted, a wry grin tugging at his lips. Though next time you need a guy to kiss in a bar, maybe lead with the galactic conspiracies and assassination plots. Where's the fun in that? Her smile was sharp, playful. Your idea of fun needs work. Good thing I've got you to fix it, she said, her voice warm with something that made his chest tighten. As they worked side by side orchestrating the largest humanitarian effort in recent memory, Jackson's mind drifted to patterns again. The pattern that had drawn them together in a dingy bar. The pattern of corruption they'd shattered. The new pattern they were weaving, a galaxy where justice might just outshine greed. Space was like music, his grandmother had said, and sometimes you had to compose your own song. With Saris's fierce passion for justice matching his own rekindled purpose, Jackson believed they might create a melody worth hearing. The cryovault hung in the void like a frozen teardrop, its surface encased in a kilometers-thick shell of ice built over millennia. Beneath that glacial armor lay the galaxy's most exhaustive archive of legal documents, treaties, and records evidence that could crush the stellar conglomerate's last shred of credibility. "Remind me why we couldn't just subpoena these records," Jackson asked, checking his suit's environmental seals for the third time. The Starfalcon 9 held position just outside the vault's defense perimeter, cloaked in the sensor shadow of a derelict mining platform. "Because the moment we filed official requests, they'd vanish in accidents," Saris replied, her armor adapting to the extreme cold with fluid precision. "The conglomerate has allies everywhere, even among the vault's keepers. We need the originals before they're tampered with. So we're breaking and entering a government facility. Technically, it's liberating public records illegally suppressed," she said, checking her plasma cutter, its charge glowing full. "That's a damn creative take on the law." "I learned from the best," she said, a glint in her eye. "The conglomerate wrote the book on legal gymnastics. Time we added a few pages of our own." Lyra's voice crackled through their helmets. "Patrol drone passing in 30 seconds. You'll have a 6-minute window before the next sweep." They waited in the airlock, the chronometer ticking down. In the dim emergency lighting, Jackson studied Saris. The past days had worn her down. He saw it in the tight lines around her eyes, the way her shoulders bore an invisible burden. Leading a revolution while playing by legal rules was a heavy load. "You're staring," she said without looking at him, "admiring your armor. Very shiny. Liar." "Fine," he said, voice softening. "I'm wondering what you're not telling me. You've been distracted since the Spire. What's really in those archives?" She was silent for a long moment, then met his gaze. "Evidence about Starvale breach. The real orders ones that came from above Vincent's pay grade." Jackson's blood chilled. "You think the conglomerate was behind it?" "I know they were," she said, her violet eyes heavy with something like sympathy. "The refugee convoy you saved, they were carrying whistleblower scientists who'd uncovered the truth about Ethereum abundance. The attack wasn't random piracy. It was an assassination disguised as chaos. Your unit was ordered to stand down to ensure it succeeded." "Yes," she said, her voice steady but pained. "I'm sorry. I know it's not what you wanted to hear." "No," Jackson said, a cold certainty settling in his gut, almost like relief. "It's exactly what I needed. For 2 years, I've questioned if saving those lives cost my career my honor. Now I know they weren't just refugees. They were targets. We saved the evidence with the people." "Windows open," Lyra announced. "Move now." They launched from the airlock, 2 figures cutting through the starfield. The cryovault loomed its icy surface, scattering their suit lights in prismatic bursts. Up close, the ice told a story of eons, layers of cosmic dust, trapped comet water, the detritus of centuries. The maintenance access point, a thermal exhaust port venting heat from the vault's quantum cores, was exactly where Saris's intel had placed it, in maddeningly narrow. "You didn't mention we'd be crawling through a tube sized for a kid," Jackson grunted, dragging himself forward by his fingertips. "I said it'd be challenging," Saris replied. "You said mildly uncomfortable. In Aurelian military terms, those are the same," she said, a faint smirk in her voice. "Remind me to update my translator." Jackson muttered. They emerged into a maintenance chamber, untouched for decades, ice crystals glittering on every surface, their breath-forming clouds in the sub-zero air. The schematics placed them 6 levels below their target, the restricted historical archives, where documents too sensitive for digital storage were kept. "Lyra, we're in," Jackson said. "Security status." "Minimal automated systems," the AI replied. "The vault leans on isolation and cold to keep intruders out. Most beings would be frozen solid by now." Comforting Jackson said, activating his suit's heating elements, which struggled against the biting chill. "Which way?" Saris checked her wrist display and pointed to a frozen elevator shaft. "Up. Gravity's low here, we can free climb." They ascended like phantoms, the only sounds their breathing and the occasional crack of ice under their grips. Jackson's mind churned processing Saris's revelation about Starvale Breach. He'd thought he'd just been a soldier caught between duty and conscience. Now he knew he'd been a pawn in a larger game where conscience was the only unscripted move. "Stop," Saris whispered suddenly. They pressed against the shaft walls as voices echoed above, not machines but people. Someone else was here with the same idea. "Make sure the charges are set right," one voice said. "The boss wants this section to look like a structural collapse." "I know what the boss wants," another snapped. "Just keep watch while I rig the quantum scramblers. Once these go off, every record in this wing's gone." Jackson caught Saris's eye. She held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. They burst from the shaft in perfect sync. The 2 saboteurs, humans in conglomerate security gear, barely had time to register shock before Saris's stun baton slammed into one's chest and Jackson's fist sent the other to the floor. "Explosives," Saris said, inspecting the devices they'd been planting. "Designed to mimic a cold-induced cascade failure. It'd destroy everything while the Vault's AI reports an accident. Can you disarm them?" "Already done," she said, pulling the charges free with practiced ease. "But this means they expected us. Or they're covering every base." Jackson secured the unconscious saboteurs with restraint tape. "Either way, we need to move faster." They reached the restricted archives where quantum locks sealed the door, impossible to crack under normal conditions. But normal wasn't their game. "Lyra, you're up," Jackson said. "Finally something fun," the AI replied, her infiltration protocols humming. Minutes later, the lock side open. "Heads up," Lyra added. "I'm picking up odd thermal readings deeper in the vault. Someone's using heavy equipment way less subtle than you two." The restricted archives were a marvel of paranoia, rows of sealed cases stretching into the frigid dark, holding documents too dangerous for digital storage. The air was so cold it could preserve paper and data crystals for millennia. "Section G7, Saris said, moving with purpose. "Military Tribunal Records, 2387-2389. They found it, and Jackson's hands were steady as he opened the case marked Starvale Breach Incident Classified Ultra. Inside, preserved in film, were the documents that had haunted him for years. But the addendum stole his breath. "Operation Nexus Purge," he read aloud. "Phase 1, eliminate whistleblowers in Refugee Convoy Delta 9. Phase 2, discredit interfering military personnel. Phase 3, use incident to justify tighter refugee route restrictions." "They planned it all," Saris said, her voice soft but heavy. "Your unit was set up to fail. Follow orders, the whistleblowers die. Disobey, you're court-martialed and disgraced. They win either way. Except we saved them." Jackson said, a knot in his chest loosening one he hadn't known was there. "We saved them and the evidence survived. That's why they're desperate to control the story." An explosion shook the vault, ice cascading from the ceiling like frozen rain. "That'd be the heavy equipment I mentioned," Lyra said. "Someone's breaching the lower vaults with mining charges. Not subtle at all." "Can you ID them?" Jackson asked. "Working on it." "Oh, that's interesting. It's an Aurelian military unit, special forces by their signatures." Saris went rigid. "What designation?" "Eclipse Legion," Lyra said. "Elite unit answers only to the High Command Council," Saris finished, her voice flat as death. "My father's personal troops," Jackson processed that. "Your father, who we're hoping is secretly on our side." "Yes," she said, already moving deeper into the vault. "Either he's gathering evidence too, or he's destroying it to cover his tracks." They ran through corridors of frozen knowledge, chasing the sounds of destruction. The cold deepened their suit heaters, faltering as ice crusted Jackson's visor faster than the defrosters could manage. In the deep archives reserved for pre-alliance records, they found the Aurelian unit, 6 soldiers in full combat armor, systematically torching specific cases under their commander's watch. Jackson recognized him from briefings, Crown Commander Theron Verasaris' father. His helmet retracted, revealing features that mirrored Saris's same violet eyes, but weathered by decades of command. "Stand down," Saris commanded, stepping forward, weapon lowered but ready. The soldiers spun weapons tracking, but Theron raised a hand to halt them. "Daughter," he said, his voice calm as a frozen sea. "You're earlier than expected." "Father," she replied, the word cold enough to freeze helium. "Care to explain why you're destroying evidence?" "Destroying?" Theron's smile was sharp as a winter gale. "My dear child, I'm preserving it. The conglomerate's rot runs centuries deep, Theron Vera said, his voice resonant with unshakable conviction. Exposing it overnight would have crashed half the galaxy's economy. I prevented a war that could have claimed billions. He met Saris's gaze unyielding. By playing along, I kept their worst impulses in check while documenting every crime, every conspiracy, waiting for the right moment. And that moment's now, Saris challenged, her voice low and dangerous. After countless deaths, after colonies burned, after your daughter had to spark the change, Theron's stern features softened just a fraction. You were magnificent in the council chamber. That bomb was an unexpected gift. Nothing lays bare true character like attempted murder. You knew about the bomb, Saris said, her voice a razor's edge, quiet but deadly. I suspected, Theron admitted. Klein and Kale were desperate. I ensured their device was survivable with quick action. Jackson's chest burned with rage. You used us as bait. Your own daughter. I used the tools at hand to secure the outcome. Theron said, meeting Jackson's glare with calm certainty. Tell me, Captain Cade, would your testimony have burned as brightly if it wasn't forged in raw conviction? Would you have acted differently, knowing the full truth? That doesn't give you the right. Father, Saris cut in, her voice slicing through the tension like a plasma blade. The files on Operation Nexus Purge, do you have them? Everything on Starville Breach is secured, Theron said, gesturing to a sealed case on a grav sled. The real orders, the names of every player. Then we're done here, Saris said, turning to leave, then pausing. When this is over, we'll have a long talk about your methods and manipulations. I look forward to it, Theron said, his smile carrying a rare warmth. You've become everything I hoped, Saris, a leader who puts justice before politics, truth before convenience, even if you learned it from a human instead of your family. Maybe Jackson said, his voice hard, because human soldiers know something your long game misses. He took Saris's hand, feeling her fingers lace with his, a quiet anchor. People aren't pawns. Every life you sacrificed was someone's entire universe ending. You got your evidence, but others paid the price. That makes you no better than the conglomerate. Theron studied them, his violet eyes unreadable. Perhaps, but results matter, Captain. The conglomerate's power is broken. The truth will rise. Millions will live who'd have died. Can your conscience live with that trade? My conscience lives with what I choose, not what you decide for me, Jackson said, turning away. Come on, Saris. We've got what we came for. They left Theron to his preservation, navigating the cryovault's frozen corridors in silence. It wasn't until they were sealed in the Starfalcon 9's airlock, ice melting from their suits, that Saris spoke. He's not wrong about the results, she said, her voice soft, tears frozen on her cheeks. Maybe not, Jackson said, helping her remove her helmet, his thumbs gently wiping away the melting ice. But he's not right either. There's a difference between making tough calls and letting others pay for them. The burden of command is one you carry yourself, he said, cupping her face, his touch steady despite the cold. You could have played his game, scheming in the shadows. Instead, you put yourself on the line, stood in that chamber, nearly died disarming that bomb. You nearly died, she corrected, her voice catching. Details, he said, flashing a smile to lighten the moment. Point is, you chose the harder path because it was honest. That's why people follow you, not your bloodline or rank, but because you lead from the front. She leaned into his touch, eyes closing, her breath warm against his palm. Sometimes I wonder if I'm strong enough, if I can be what the galaxy needs. Hey, he said, waiting until her violet eyes met his. You kissed a total stranger in a bar to save the galaxy. That's plenty strong. Her laugh broke free, bright and unguarded, cutting through the airlock's chill. That was strategic necessity. Sure it was. He teased, acutely aware of their closeness, her warmth against his hands. Nothing to do with me looking like I needed kissing. Well, she said, her eyes darkening, pupils dilating like twin eclipses. You did. And you still do. This kiss was worlds apart from the frantic data transfer in the shattered rim. It was slow, deliberate, a silent conversation woven from trust and shared battles. Her lips, cool from the vault's frost, but warming under his, tasted of starlight and defiance, a spark of hope kindled in the void between stars. Her breath mingled with his, soft and steady each moment, stretching as if time itself paused to let them linger. Her fingers tightened on his shoulders, grounding them both, and when they parted, both breathless, Jackson felt his universe shift as if a new orbit had locked into place. Lara Saris said, her eyes still locked on his set course for the transit point. We need to get this evidence to secure channels before the ship lurched, slamming them against the airlock wall. Alarms screamed as Lyra's voice filled the cabin. Interdiction Field 3. Conglomerate heavy cruisers just dropped out of hyperspace. They're jamming our comms and charging weapons. So much for stealth, Jackson muttered, pulling away reluctantly. Can we run? Not through an interdiction field, Ceres said, already moving toward the cockpit, her commander's poise snapping back with startling speed. They've got us boxed. Then we fight. Lyra, full power to shields, Ceres ordered. Jackson, can this ship dance? Like you wouldn't believe, he said, sliding into the pilot's seat, hands flying over the controls. But 3 cruisers, we don't need to win, just survive until help arrives. What help? Our comms are jammed. Her smile was sharp as a blade. My father's not the only one who plays long games. I activated an emergency beacon in the vault. The Crescent Armada's been waiting just outside sensor range. You knew this would happen. I suspected, she said, gripping his shoulder as the first weapons fire splashed against their shields. The conglomerate couldn't let us leave with the evidence. Now fly, soldier. Show them what humans can do. Jackson grinned, throwing the Star Falcon 9 into a spiraling dive that made the inertial dampener scream. Yes, ma'am, the battle was brief but brutal. The conglomerate cruisers had raw firepower, but the Star Falcon 9 had speed and a pilot who danced with chaos itself. Jackson wove through energy beams and missile salvos with millimeter precision, the ship an extension of his will. But the odds were grim. 3-1 in space was a death sentence, and their shields were crumbling fast. Hull breach in Section 4, Lyra reported. I'm sealing it, but we can't take much more. Just a bit longer, Ceres murmured, eyes glued to her tactical display. They're almost here. Space erupted with new contacts as the Crescent Armada dropped out of hyperspace in flawless formation. Suddenly, the conglomerate cruisers were the ones outgunned and outmatched. Conglomerate vessels, Admiral Voris Kyle's voice boomed, this is the Crescent Armada. You're attempting to destroy evidence in a criminal investigation. Stand down or be destroyed. The cruisers tried to flee, but didn't get far. As their debris sparkled in the void, Jackson slumped in his seat, adrenaline fading to exhaustion. Please tell me that's the last surprise today. Actually, Sarah said, her tone making him look up. There's one more. She held a data crystal from the evidence cases. The Starvale breach files included a message from a scientist your unit saved. She wanted to thank the soldier who defied orders to protect them. Jackson took the crystal, his hands trembling slightly. I never knew their names. It happened so fast. Dr. Alina Korsov-Saris said softly. She cracked the Ethereum synthesis problem, made the abundance we're fighting for possible. Her smile was gentle. One saved life, changing the galaxy. Your grandmother would be proud. He clutched the crystal, 2 years of guilt lifting like a fog. Yeah, I think she would. Crescent Armada signals they're ready to escort us back to the Spire, Lyra announced. Also, someone should address the hull breaches before we all die. Just a thought, always the optimist, Jackson said, smiling. They'd done it, retrieved the evidence, survived the ambush, and maybe found something worth fighting for beyond vengeance or redemption. As the fleet formed up around them, he reached for Ceres's hand. She took it without hesitation, their fingers interlacing like they'd always belonged together. So he said, What's next? We present the evidence, hold the trials, rebuild the trade routes, she said, squeezing his hand. Save the galaxy, one impossible task at a time. Sounds exhausting. That's why I need a good pilot, she said, leaning against his shoulder. And maybe someone who's not afraid to call me out when I'm too much like my father. That's a full-time job. Good thing I'm offering full-time employment. He laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. Benefits package, terrible hours, constant danger, and the fate of millions on your shoulders. Perfect, she said. Where do I sign? She kissed him again, a quiet promise in the cockpit's dim light, and it was answer enough. Outside, the stars danced on, indifferent to their struggles. But in this battered ship, 2 soldiers who'd found each other across species and strife charted a course for a future worth fighting for. The Grand Assembly Hall had transformed. Gone were the conglomerate's gaudy logos and Trade Federation banners, replaced by flags of every affected world. Refugee representatives sat beside military officers, independent miners, next to core world diplomats, a chaotic but honest democracy born from surviving catastrophe and demanding justice. Jackson adjusted his dress uniform for the 10th time, still uneasy with the title pinned to his chest, Special Humanitarian Envoy. Saris's idea a way to give him standing in negotiations without dragging him back into military service. Stop fidgeting, Lyra said through his earpiece. You look passable for a human who usually dresses like a space drifter. Thanks for the pep talk, Jackson muttered. I live to serve, Lyra replied. Also, Saris is approaching from your 6. Try not to stare too obviously. He turned and, despite the warning, stared. Saris strode toward him in formal military dress, but with touches that spoke of the galaxy's shifting tides, a human-style collar pin, refugee-woven fabric, and her rank insignia, symbols of unity over raw authority. Ready for this? She asked, stopping close enough for him to catch that impossible scent of ozone and starlight. Ready to watch politicians bicker for 6 hours, can't contain my excitement. It won't be 6 hours, she said, her smile laced with steel. I've made sure of that. Before he could ask what she meant, the assembly was called to order. They took their places, Saris at the military coalition table, Jackson with the humanitarian observers. The distance felt wrong after all they had been through, but diplomacy demanded appearances. Judge Arya Solon presided, her presence more vibrant than during the emergency session. The thwarted archive destruction and the flood of evidence had vindicated her stand against the conglomerate. This assembly convenes to forge new protocols for Ethereum distribution and interstellar humanitarian law, she announced. The floor recognizes Commander Saris Vera of the Aurelian Dominion. Saris rose and the hall fell silent, her voice carrying to every corner without amplification, a trick of precedent design. Honored delegates, we stand at a crossroads. The old system is shattered, built on lies and propped up by artificial scarcity. We can't just patch the cracks and move on. We need something bold, something revolutionary. She gestured and holographic displays bloomed across the hall. Not dense legal tomes, but a simple radical vision. The Free Flow Accord, she declared. 3 principles. First, Ethereum technology and distribution go fully open source. No patents, no monopolies, no gatekeepers. Second, an independent transit authority, staffed by every world, not just the major powers. Third, restricting humanitarian movement becomes a crime against sentience itself. The hall erupted in a storm of voices, objections, support amendments. Jackson watched the chaos with a pilot's eye, noting which delegates resisted and which leaned in thoughtful. This is economically impossible. Director Foster Klein's nervous replacement protested, her voice shaky. Is already being provided. Saris interrupted smoothly, cutting off Director Foster, the nervous replacement for Torrin Klein, who looked like she'd drawn the short straw. The Crescent Armada stands ready to escort and supply any world that signs the treaty. We're also releasing our entire Ethereum synthesis database technology we've kept classified for 3 centuries. A wave of stunned murmurs swept the hall. Jackson caught delegates furiously calculating, their minds racing to grasp what unrestricted Ethereum access meant for their economies. The Kalari Union supports this proposal, Ambassador Zoran declared, rising to his towering height, his voice booming with conviction. We've suffered too long under artificial restrictions. No more. The Terran Colonial Union seconds, Admiral Clara Venson added, her voice firm. Jackson felt a jolt of surprise, catching her slight nod across the chamber. Apparently some people could change, but not everyone was swayed. General Voris Kael's replacement, a younger officer named Darius, stood with rigid precision. The Aurelian High Command has concerns. Releasing classified technology, abandoning security protocols, this invites chaos. Chaos is what we have now. Saris countered, her voice a blade of clarity. Refugees dying in the void colonies, withering without supplies, entire civilizations held hostage by those who control fuel. That's chaos. What I propose is freedom. Freedom, Darius repeated, his tone dripping with skepticism. A pretty word that often breeds anarchy. Then let me offer an uglier one, a new voice cut in. Crown Commander Theron Vera entered the hall, and the Aurelian delegation straightened instinctively. Survival, because that's what's at stake. Jackson tensed, uncertain of Theron's motives, noticing other humanitarian observers mirroring his unease. Theron's reputation for manipulation cast a long shadow. The evidence from the cryovault paints a stark picture. Theron continued, taking a central position where all could see him. The conglomerate's stranglehold wasn't just about profit, it was about control. They sought to shape the galaxy's fate, deciding which civilizations thrived and which faded. They nearly succeeded. He paused, letting the weight settle. My daughter proposes we scatter that power so widely no single force can ever reclaim it. Some call it chaos. I call it evolution. Easy words from someone who played both sides. Director Foster accused, her voice trembling, but bold in desperation. How do we know this isn't another manipulation? You don't, Theron said simply. But consider the alternative: return to the old system, tweaked perhaps with new faces, but the same bones. In 50 years, 100 someone else tries the same power grab. The temptation of controlling Ethereum is too great. He gestured to the treaty display. Or we make it worthless to control by setting it free. Remove the temptation entirely. And if hostile forces, pirates, terrorists, rogue states exploit this freedom, Darius challenged, then we handle them, as always, Saris answered, her voice unwavering, with law, justice, and when necessary, force. But we don't punish entire populations for the crimes of a few. The debate raged for another hour, but Jackson saw the tide turning. Smaller delegations, those hardest hit by restrictions, pledged support one by one. Even some core worlds, eyeing the economic potential of open trade, began to shift. Then came the moment that changed everything. I'd like to speak, a quiet voice said, trembling but resolute. A young woman in plain clothes stood in the observer section, visibly daunted by the hall's grandeur, but standing tall. Judge Arya Solon frowned. You are Lila Corrin, she said, swallowing hard. I represent the Drift refugees, 3 million souls stuck between systems for 2 years because we couldn't afford passage. The hall fell silent. A heavy quiet waited with the raw truth of suffering. I'm no diplomat or politician. Lila continued, her voice gaining strength. I'm just someone who watched my daughter grow up in a cargo hold because Ethereum costs more than our lives. We don't care about your economics or security debates. We want to go home. We want our children to see skies, not steel walls. This treaty promises that. She paused, voice breaking. So for 3 million displaced souls, I'm begging you sign it. She sat trembling. In the silence, Jackson heard a delegate's quiet sob, the raw truth of pain piercing through their number crunching. The Colonial Union moves for an immediate vote, Venson said, her voice rough with emotion. Seconded, Zoran added instantly. Judge Solon nodded slowly. Very well. The free flow accord is before the assembly. All in favor. Hands rose, first a few, then dozens, then a wave as even hesitant delegations followed the current. When the count ended, only a handful of conglomerate loyalists held out. Motion carries, Solon announced. The free flow accord is ratified. Ethereum technology will be released to all signatory worlds within the week. The Transit Authority begins operations immediately. The celebration was brief, swallowed by the urgency of work ahead. As delegates scattered to their governments, Jackson was pulled into impromptu planning sessions. Everyone wanted a piece of the Starvale breach hero, the human who'd helped topple the conspiracy. It was exhausting. Escaping Saris asked, finding him hours later on an observation deck, the official spaces now quiet as celebrations moved elsewhere. Tactical withdrawal. Jackson corrected, scooting over on the bench. I'm better at fighting conspiracies than debating transport logistics. You did well, she said, sitting close. Lila was impressed you actually listened when she explained their needs. Novel concept, listening to the people you're helping, he said, smirking. Revolutionary even. She leaned against him, her military poise melting into shared exhaustion. We did it, Jackson. We actually did it. You did it, he said. I just flew the ship. Stop that, she said, turning to face him, her violet eyes fierce. You did more than fly. You gave me hope when I had nothing but desperate plans. You risked everything for strangers. Pretty sure that kiss in the bar started it all, he teased. Her laugh filled the deck, bright as starlight. Are you ever gonna let that go? Never, he said, grinning. I'm carving a plaque. Here's where Princess Sirius assaulted an innocent human with her lips. I told you I'm not a princess, she said, mock indignant. And it was hardly assault. No. He leaned closer, voice low. What would you call it then? Strategic necessity, she said, but her eyes darkened, pupils dilating like twin nebulae. And now what's your strategic assessment of this moment? She considered her expression playfully serious. The treaty's signed and the conspiracy's broken, and I'm alone with a maddeningly attractive human who keeps saving my life. Sounds dangerous. Extremely, he said, closing the distance. This kiss was no frantic data transfer or desperate release. It was a slow, deliberate dance years in the making, born in a grimy bar, and forged through battles and revelations. Her lips were warm, tasting of ozone and starlight, a quiet promise that spoke of futures beyond politics. Her hands slid to his neck, fingers threading through his hair, pulling him closer as the kiss deepened, each breath a shared vow. When they parted breathless, the station's lights had shifted to evening cycle, bathing them in soft golds and purples. So Jackson said, relearning how to breathe, what happens now? Now, Sarah said, her smile tender yet sharp. We implement the treaty hunt, the remaining conspirators rebuild refugee routes, set up the transit authority, and face every inevitable setback. Save the galaxy, one impossible task at a time. I meant with us, he said, voice soft. I know, she said, taking his hand, studying their entwined fingers, human and Aurelian, different but joined. My father would call us foolish. Interspecies relationships are messy, politically risky, potentially divisive. Your father thought manipulation was a strategy, Jackson said. His relationship advice might not be gold. Fair point, she said, squeezing his hand. Truth is, I don't know what's next for us. We're from different worlds, different traditions. You chase freedom. My people live for duty. You act on instinct. I plan 17 steps ahead. We're probably incompatible. Probably, he agreed, a grin tugging at his lips. Smarter to stay professional colleagues. Much smarter, she said. No personal complications, just duty. Very sensible. They locked eyes, then burst out laughing. We're not doing the smart thing, are we? She asked. When have we ever? He pulled her closer. Besides, someone told me the universe rewards the bold. Wise woman. She said, her smile softening. She has her moments. They sat in easy silence, watching stars spin past the observation port. Out there, refugee ships were hearing they could move again, mining operations gearing up for unshackled demand, civilizations breathing freely at last. I got a message from Dr. Alina Korsov, Sarah said after a while. She wants to thank you in person for saving her life. I'd like that, Jackson said, thinking of the recording, one life rippling out to save millions. Maybe she can explain her synthesis process. I got maybe half of her papers. Only half I managed, a third, Sari said, shifting against him. She also offered us jobs at her research station. Said she needs people who get both the science and the human cost of Ethereum. Jackson raised an eyebrow. She was specific, Sarah said, smiling. That pilot and the princess who kicked down the conglomerate's door. I think she ships us. Ships us, Jackson's cheeks warmed. I know what it means, just didn't expect a scientist to have opinions on our love life. Everyone's got opinions, Sarah said. We're a story on the social nets. Earth soldier kisses alien princess in a bar. 3 million subscribers and counting. They've even got songs. Oh God, Jackson groaned, burying his face in his hands. The Kalari version's catchy, she teased. Can we go back to being shot at? Less embarrassing. Sorry, she said, pulling his hands away. We're heroes now. Heroes deal with scrutiny, but they also get to choose. And I choose this. I choose us if you'll have me. Saris, he said, cradling her face, the gesture now as natural as breathing. I'm a washed-up pilot with authority issues in a ship held together by spit. You're military royalty who could have anyone in the galaxy. You sure? She silenced him with a kiss, slow and certain, then pulled back just enough to speak. I'm sure you're the one who stood up in a bar, flew through an ion storm, diffused a bomb with your bare hands, and told my father people aren't pawns. Also, you make me laugh. Do you know how rare that is? About as rare as someone who makes strategic necessity look that good, he said. Flatterer. Guilty. Their laughter faded into silence, broken by Lyra's voice from hidden speakers. Hate to interrupt this touching moment, but you've got visitors. One's trying to hack my systems out of boredom, pretty good at it too. Tell them we're busy, Sari said, not moving. I would, Lyra said, but they're persistent. Rather skillfully, I might add. Lyra said, her tone tinged with reluctant admiration. Jackson and Saris exchanged a glance and headed back inside, finding a small group waiting in the corridor. Zane Corrin stood there dressed in what could generously be called formal wear, his weathered grin a stark contrast to the polished surroundings. Beside him was a young woman, her void-born pallor and intense eyes marking her as someone who saw the universe in lines of code. "Cade, Your Highness," Zane greeted, his grin widening. "Sorry to crash your moment, but we've got a situation. When don't we?" Jackson sighed, bracing himself. "What's the trouble now? Conglomerate holdouts," Zane said, his expression turning grave. "They've seized 3 major transit nodes demanding the free flow accord be scrapped. They're threatening to torch the Ethereum synthesis facilities if they don't get their way." "Of course they are," Sari said, straightening her commander's poise, snapping back like a shield. "How long do we have?" 48 hours, maybe less," Zane replied. "I can get you there in 36, the young woman interjected, her voice brimming with confidence. "Assuming your ship isn't as much of a wreck as it looks," Jackson bristled. "Excuse me, the Star Falcon 9 is a classic. A classic death trap held together by spit and hope." "Yeah, I've heard," Jackson cut in. She grinned undeterred. "I'm Kalen Rin, best pilot in the Rim territories. Also, I owe Zane a few favors, so here I am." "Best pilot?" Jackson raised an eyebrow. "That's a bold claim." "It's a fact," Kalen shot back. "I can shave 6 hours off your best time through the Solaris Drift." "No one can do that." "Wanna bet children?" Saris interrupted, her tone dry but firm. "Can we save the pilot pissing contest for after we stop catastrophic infrastructure destruction?" "She started it," Jackson muttered. "And I finished it," Kalen countered, smirking. "So we doing this or not?" Jackson looked at Saris, seeing his own resolve mirrored in her violet eyes. They'd signed the treaty, won the political war, but the fight for the galaxy's future was far from over. "Lyra," he called, "prep the ship. We're back in business." "Oh joy," the AI replied, dripping sarcasm. "More suicide missions. Just what my processors needed." "Would you rather run transport logistics?" Jackson asked. "Pre-flights starting now," Lyra said. As they headed for the docking bay, Kalen fell into step beside them, her curiosity unmasked. "So it's true, you two are really together. The human hero and the alien commander." "Is that a problem?" Saris asked, her voice cool but edged. "Problem? Hell no," Kalen said, her grin widening. "It's fantastic. You've got no idea what you've started. Human Aurelian couples who are coming out of hiding across the galaxy. Kids who felt alone now see they're a part of something bigger. You've given people hope that differences don't mean division." "We just fell in love," Jackson said, uncomfortable with the myth-making. "We're not symbols." "Too bad," Zane interjected. "Symbols are what the galaxy needs right now. Proof the old walls are crumbling, that we're building something better." They reached the Star Falcon 9, and Jackson felt a familiar surge of affection for his battered ship. She'd carried them through hell and back, and she wasn't done yet. "One more mission," he murmured, running a hand along her scarred hull. "One more mission to start," Saris corrected, her voice soft but certain. "This isn't an ending, Jackson. It's a beginning." She was right. The treaty was just words without action. Conglomerate remnants would fight back, and other power-hungry factions would rise to fill the void. Building a just galaxy would take years, decades, maybe centuries. But standing there surrounded by old friends and new allies, with the woman he loved by his side, and the stars calling them to adventure, Jackson couldn't imagine being anywhere else. "All right then," he said, hitting the airlock control. "Let's go save the galaxy." "Again, try not to defuse any more bombs with your extremities," Lyra advised as they boarded. "No promises," Jackson shot back. As the Star Falcon 9 prepped for departure, he caught Saris watching him, her expression soft, unreadable. "What?" "Nothing," she said, her smile private, intimate. "Just thinking about patterns. What kind? The kind that bring a burned-out soldier and a desperate commander together in a bar," she said, taking his hand as they walked toward the cockpit. "The kind that turn a kiss into a revolution. The kind that make me believe we might actually pull this off, the treaty, the rebuilding us." She squeezed his hand, her touch grounding. "My people say love is the gravity that bends space itself. Humans say love conquers all," Jackson said. Less poetic, but same idea. They reached the cockpit to find Kalen already in the co-pilot's seat, her hands dancing over the nav controls. "Hope you don't mind," she said. "Your route planning was inefficient." "That's my seat," Sarah said, her tone mild but pointed. Was your seat, Kalen replied. I'm the better pilot. She's not wrong, Lyra chimed in. Her calculations cut our transit time by 4.7 hours, Trader Jackson muttered. I prefer pragmatist, Lyra said. Also, Zane's asking to bring some crates of unspecified cargo. How unspecified? The kind that might explode if we're not careful, Perfect Jackson said, because this mission wasn't dangerous enough. Despite the banter, anticipation surged in Jackson's chest. This was his calling, not politics or ceremonies, but this flying into danger with people he trusted, fighting for what mattered. Final systems check complete, Lyra announced. Cleared for departure whenever you stop having feelings and start flying. Everyone's a critic, Jackson said, sliding into the pilot's seat, hands settling on the controls like coming home. All right, folks, let's see what trouble we can find. The Star Falcon 9 lifted off smoothly, leaving the luminous spire behind. Through the viewport, Jackson saw other ships departing, military vessels, civilian transports, even a few repurposed pirate rigs, all heading out to enforce the new order to make free transit real. It's really happening, Sarah said softly, standing behind his chair. Change. Real change. Yeah, he said, reaching up to cover her hand on his shoulder. Scared, terrified. Exhilarated, ready, she said, leaning down to kiss his cheek, her lips warm against his skin. With you, all of the above. Good, he said, because I've got no clue what I'm doing. That's never stopped you, she said, her smile a quiet spark. Fair point. As they jumped to hyperspace racing toward their next crisis, Jackson let himself feel a rare moment of contentment. He'd started this journey as a broken soldier, drowning guilt in synthetic whiskey. Now he was part of something greater. A movement, a partnership, a love that defied species and shook the old order. His grandmother had been right. Space was music, and you had to find its rhythm. With Saris beside him and the stars ahead, Jackson was dancing to the right song. So Kalen said, hyperspace streaming and past the windows. Anyone gonna explain why your computer keeps throwing shade at my flying? That's just Lyra, Jackson said. She's protective. Of the ship, of me, he admitted. Sweet, Kalen said. Weird, but sweet. Her fingers never stopped moving over the controls. So this is what heroes do between saving the galaxy, bicker with AIs, and make eyes at alien commanders. Pretty much, Zane confirmed from behind. Though sometimes there's drinking. Speaking of, he added, I brought the good stuff. Real Earth whiskey, not that synthetic swill. I love you, Jackson said fervently. I know, Zane grinned. Figured we'd toast the new era right if we survive the next 48 hours. We'll survive, Sarah said with quiet certainty. We have to. Too many people are counting on us. No pressure, Jackson muttered. All the pressure, she corrected. That's what makes it worth doing. As the Star Falcon 9 hurtled through hyperspace toward their next challenge, Jackson reflected on the strange path his life had taken from soldier to deserter to hero, or whatever he was now. Partner to an Aurelian commander, symbol of interspecies unity, troubleshooter for galactic crises. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but it was the one he'd chosen. With Saris's hand warm on his shoulder, their ragtag crew ready for anything, in a better galaxy within reach, he couldn't imagine wanting another. Hey, Kalen said suddenly, the forms are right. You two are disgustingly cute together. Thank you, Saris said, her tone uncertain. Not entirely a compliment, Kalen said, smiling. But it's true. Also, is it legit you kissed him to transfer secure data? Smoothest or nerdiest pickup line ever. Why not both? Jackson suggested. Both is good. Saris agreed, her laugh filling the cockpit like starlight. Outside, the universe waited with its dangers and possibilities, the conglomerate holdouts, the refugee crises, the thousand challenges of building anew from the old's ashes. But inside the Star Falcon 9, soaring on wings of hope and defiance, the future had already arrived, and it was beautiful.